All right, so today we have Jesse Petrilla with us. He is a friend of mine and a local Auburn, California resident. He's an entrepreneur, a business owner, and recently an author. Congratulations on
Aspiring.
that. Founder of Petrilla Technologies. He served in the military and also as a council member in Orange County. Married, 2 boys. Jesse,
Yes.
welcome
Thank
to
you.
the podcast. How you doing?
Thanks for having me.
Of course.
You know, this is my first podcast that I've done in ever.
Really?
So yes, you were
oh
the
man,
you
what
were
an
the first
honor.
as I foray back into politics.
Thank you so much
Somewhat.
for coming on. I really appreciate it. It's nice to have you on. Give us a little bit of your background, your story, where you grew up, what you do.
All right. Well, I'm from here in Northern California. This is my old stomping ground. Spent the last 20 years. First, I couldn't wait. Back it up a little bit. I couldn't wait to get out of this town, and then I spent the next 20 years figuring out how to get back and how to afford it. And so I finally did it. We moved our family up here to the state of Jefferson, as it's called, where for anyone that's not familiar with that, it's the fun protest against the policies of Sacramento. So it's a nice conservative area where people, I wouldn't even say conservative, I'd say logical, because it's really the difference between logical and illogical at this point.
Are you talking about specifically
conservatives
Auburn?
versus leftists? So
Yeah. Are you talking about specifically
Auburn, the whole area, I would say
area?
the foothills. Virtually, California is being pulled by the nose by 2 cities, and it's really just Los Angeles and San Francisco that lead the rest of the state, and it's a very conservative state. And so I was very happy to get out of Southern California. We had fled behind the Orange Curtain for a while. I lived in Los Angeles before that, and we were hiding out there in a nice little conservative area in Southern California, and then it got taken over through shenanigans, ballot harvesting, and whatnot. It didn't have a single Republican representative in the Congress representing any of Orange County at one point. And so we left. We left up here. We'll never leave, though, California. To the people that are considering leaving, I would say, don't be a coward. Stay and fight. If you all leave, who's going to stay to fight?
Well, it had to be you had to have some positives living there. I mean, is the weather nicer?
California, I think, is a fantastic state. The weather is great. We have virtually every climate except for tropical, and I mean, it's here we are in the foothills. We've got wineries and the ocean's a couple hours away. We got ski resorts 45 minutes away, and we don't have to deal with the snow ourselves. It's just a wonderful location. I spent 20 years dabbling in a little bit of whatever I could for the first half of that. Trying to find my purpose in life, and God has His plans, and everything was for a purpose. And I think it really helped shape me into who I became. I tried different business ventures. I thought I was going to be a video game designer when I left. That was my goal. And about halfway through a computer science degree, I wanted nothing to do with computer programming. So it was very tedious, and I'm just too much of a people person to be around a bunch of introverts. And so it was.
And isn't Adam Sandler your friend?
No. Well, yeah. Have I told you that story? I think is that what you're alluding to?
Yeah.
So I had fun. When I was a teenager, I first moved down there. The first place I got was a guest house, which was a step up from the Ford Taurus that I was in when I lived down there for a couple months. But it was I lived in a guest house in Malibu and was just hanging out at the beach, crashing parties, and one of the parties I crashed was Adam Sandler's wedding. So I heard that he was getting married down the street from where I was staying, and I saw all the craziness, and I thought, let me go in there and schmooze a little bit. I mean, I'm not trying to sneak cameras in or anything, so I just was one of the guests. So
how old were you then?
Oh, I was 19, I think.
19, okay.
And I jumped the fence and came out of a bush, and I remember one of the security guards saw me. It wasn't a security guard that saw me. It was one of the guests saw me. And I quickly turned around and acted like I was taking a piss in the bush, because why else would I be in the bushes? And so I just pretended like I was zipping up my pants, I'm like, oh man, there was a line at the bathroom, and they just kind of snickered a little bit, and then I was in, and I walked right up to a woman it felt like True Lies, where I walked right up and I was like, "How have you been? How have you been?" And I look, and security's no longer looking at me, and then I was in. I did the bump with Jennifer Aniston next to the dance floor. I did ask her to dance, but she
Jennifer Aniston.
yes, but she said no. She's like, "I don't dance, hun." She called me hun. So I made it mostly almost to the very end, and then unfortunately I made the mistake of congratulating Adam Sandler on his wedding, and he was like, "Oh, that's great, thank you very much. So who are you?" And that was it.
Oh man!
So he personally kicked me out.
So you would probably stay there if you hadn't come up to Adam.
Yeah, it was another 5 or 10 minutes left of the party anyway. But it was.
So you stayed?
I stayed almost the whole thing. Yeah, it was fun. But no, I was having fun. I was going to clubs, and I was trying to market video games at the time that I made online. It was a little bit too early. This was circa 2002 or 3, somewhere around there.
Okay.
And I remember I made a video game called Quest for Saddam. So it would have been 2003. That was when the invasion was. And we had a download, enter your credit card, download the game type situation set up. And it was just too early. People didn't feel comfortable giving their credit cards online. And the game, frankly, wasn't that good. But it was
Saddam. Is that
it was fun.
After Saddam Hussein?
Yes. So this was the sequel. So backing up a few years, in 2002, early 2002, I released Quest for Al Qaeda: The Hunt for Bin Laden, which was a shooter video game where you fight Bin Laden and Al Qaeda, and you're going through caves. And it was just a total conversion, it was a modification of the game Duke Nukem. And it got 2 million downloads off the internet, actually. And so I was like, oh, let me start a video game company. That was always my dream. So I released the sequel, Quest for Saddam, and I was marketing that. It was exciting times, but I never saw really a dime from it. And I was starving. I mean, it was terrible, because I realized very quickly that although moving to Malibu, surrounding yourself by rich people doesn't make you rich. Mm-hmm. And so watching them and learning from them, yes. And so I was a computer technician at a store there, just fixing people's computers. But one of the big things I did was go to people's houses. So every person that I asked,
like sneaking in, like to
no, I didn't have to sneak in, no. But although one of them was Linda Hamilton too, so that was kind of cool. The Terminator, Sarah Connor from Terminator. But no, there was a number of folks whose houses I went to, but every single one, there were only a few celebrities that were there actually in Malibu.
Mm-hmm.
And most of them, in fact, almost exclusively, because every person I would ask, how did you get your money? So I was the kid with chutzpah that would be asking them all these questions there while I'm fixing their computer in their house. Every single one of them virtually said they were a business owner. And so I realized, okay, the way to get here is to start a business. I'm not going to work my way up. It's very few people work their way up in a company and become millionaires. It's almost all somebody starts a business, or you have the few lucky folks who know somebody that come into the entertainment industry or something like that from the side. But it's even that, you don't work your way up. It's all about, I realized it's all about relationships. And so I didn't know anybody. And I mean, that was the big reason why I was so poor, was that I had no skill and I didn't know anybody. And so it takes time. I mean, it was tough. I mean, those years were really hard financially. And then went to school. I was the poorest I ever was right before I started school. But I finally said, you know what, screw it. I'm just going to take out the student loans and go to school and start chipping away at it. It was Cal State Fullerton. First it was junior college, and then Cal State Fullerton. So it saved a lot of money at the JC. But it was I started working my way up, and just I had faith in God and faith in the plan. I mean, I knew that God has a plan for me, and that everything. What's that song? He's making when the pressure is on. He's making diamonds.
Yeah,
it's like that's it.
It's my daughter's favorite song.
Yeah, it's a great song, and it's totally true. I mean, I had real tough times before that. I mean, I found God when I was 17, and
so
that was
you didn't grow up.
No, not at all. I was a very atheist household, and I just single mother, but I found myself in juvenile hall. Actually, I mean, I was in and out of trouble, and so I mean, I'll tell you a story about how what got me started is I somebody gave me a Bible in the juvenile hall, and I just wanted to get out of my cell. I was there, I was 17 years old, and they were poorly staffed, and I was only out of the cell for a couple hours a day because of that. And I thought, I'll just get out. They had a Bible study going on, and some lady was there, and she was asking. I mean, I was asking her questions. I was giving her just a hard time, saying, "Oh, why?" Because my family's Jewish, so I was like, "Yeah, I'm Jewish. Where's the rabbi? Why is it only Christian stuff here?" And so she says, "Well, if you're Jewish, here's a Bible. Read the Old Testament. Learn the history." And I'm like, "Okay." So she gave me a bookmark, and she said, "By the way, I just got back from Israel." She gave me the Bible and a bookmark from Israel, and it was a very unique bookmark. It said from the garden tomb, and it had laminated mustard seeds in the parable in the Bible that said, "If you have faith as small as a mustard seed, you could tell this mountain to move from here to there, and it will move." Super unique bookmark. So fast forward 20 years. We moved back. I had started my own company, served 8 years in the military, got out as a captain. I mean, never got in trouble since then. Very, very blessed. And so we moved back here to Northern California, and I felt the Holy Spirit really pushing on me, saying, "Find this woman." It was like, and I'm thinking, how do I find this woman? I don't know what she looks like. I don't know her name. And I even told my wife, I was like, I'd like to find this woman. It would be really cool. And she's like, "How are you going to do that?" But if you did, it would really mean a lot to her, I'm sure. And I had closed my Facebook at the time. I was even thinking of reopening it and saying, "Hey, does anyone know anyone that volunteered in Auburn area circa 2001 in juvenile hall?" And maybe gave me this bookmark. But 2 weeks into it, and 2 weeks into moving here, we signed up for a church retreat up at Lake Tahoe, and we're non-denominational, so it was just a random Protestant church up here that was hosting it. So the first night they had a bonfire down at the lake, and I go down to the fire pit, and there's 3 people sitting around it. There was a couple and some other person. I talked to the lady that's sitting there. She asked me within a minute, "How did you become a Christian?" And I told her the story, and I told her about the bookmark. Now, I've told up to this point 2 people about this bookmark before. And I'm not going up to people saying, "Hey, are you the one that gave me the bookmark?" It was her. It was her.
The third person that you
she was the one that gave me the bookmark. She still volunteers in juvenile hall.
Did you recognize her, or she?
No, I told her the story, and I was like, this is how I became a Christian. Somebody gave me the Bible in juvenile hall and gave me a bookmark. I'd really like to find out who it was, and it was her.
Oh my! Wow! How was that?
Oh, it was. We couldn't speak for like 15 seconds. Cried, and she was just saying, "This is instant vindication of her life's work of trying to reach the kids," and it was just so cool. I mean, and her husband backed it up and was like, "Yeah, we went to Israel in 2001 and bought a stack of bookmarks for her juvenile hall ministry." And her name's Pam Harley. And we had her and her husband Larry over for dinner at our house. And it was just so cool. I mean, it was like, God is real.
Oh, yeah.
And that's the foundation of everything when it comes to business, when it comes to life. I mean, that's the litmus test. I mean, if anything you do in business should always reflect the Bible. The best business book there is out there is the book of Proverbs, in my opinion.
Oh, yes. So many principles and all the values they're universal throughout life, business. You're right. That book is, if someone just reads that book alone and really follows, they'll be on the good ground. For
Absolutely. Sure. Yeah. I mean, it's, I'm currently rereading through the Bible right now. It's the first time I read it was 25 years ago, something like that. And it really, I mean, it's interesting reading it from a perspective too. And I mean, I still do Bible studies, but I'm talking starting at Genesis and reading all the way through. And I'm now that I'm rereading it, as a parent, your perspective changes so much too, and there's so much you miss, and it's just really, I mean, I feel recharged like a battery when you read it, and when you study it, and when you discuss it. I mean, it really is powerful. I think that the Holy Spirit's real, God is real, and that's what drives me. That's all the blessings that I've received are from Him, because we can't take, and we don't own anything. This is all. That's what I say. People say, "Oh, look at what I've built. Look what I've done."
Mm-hmm.
We haven't built crap. Like, it's all, everything is through God. It's all from us. And I mean, He gives us the power. He gives us the energy. He gives us the wisdom and the guidance. But yeah, if we don't follow it, I mean, and it could all be taken away in an instant. That's the thing. It's really, it's been quite a journey. So
how was, let's talk a little bit about your military service. So what made you want to go into military, and how old were you when you joined?
So I went through the ROTC program at Cal State Fullerton, and commissioned in 2010. So it was fairly recently. I mean, it's I wanted to go in much earlier, but then I got in trouble, and so it was not really in the cards at the time. And it's interesting, because I was planning on going career enlisted, and I was just going to be a grunt, and I ended up being an officer. It's interesting how what appears to be such a setback at one time, because I remember I was bawling my eyes out when I got in trouble when I was 17. I was thinking, oh no, I can't be in the military. I can't. This is what I dreamed about, and
you always wanted to be.
Yeah, and who would know that what was it? 8 years later, I'd be an officer. I mean, this is like, I mean, going from being I would have just been a private and worked my way up, but yeah, I went to Afghanistan in 2012. I was a tanker, and I wanted to join to fight the jihadists. I mean, when September 11th happened, was really my welcoming to adulthood. I mean, I was 18 years old when 9/11 occurred, and I really wanted to confront these guys that attacked us. And so I couldn't be in the military, so I just went all in on studying the jihadist mindset, on fighting them at the grassroots level. I worked with various nonprofits. I even started my own nonprofit at the time that I ran for a few years, where we did different just fun and in-your-face activist actions against the jihadists, and trying to wake America up to the threat that we face. I traveled all over the world through those activities. I mean, through that activism, to Jordan, Kosovo, Bosnia, Egypt. I mean, all these different places, just really on fact-finding missions, trying to learn research the mindset of the jihadists. This is before the military. This is all just on my own. And one of the most eye-opening trips that I took was to Europe in 2009, and that was really scary, because I hadn't realized just how many inroads that the jihadists had gotten and why they got it. And it was largely from the leftists in Europe who had opened the door for them, because they won't get an inch if nobody's there to open the door for them. I mean, you look at our southern border right now is wide open, and not only that, I mean, you have policies in place. I mean, you could look at Europe. That's always been a window into our future, and sadly, most of the things that I saw there in 2009 came true about a decade later with the riots on the streets, with just unchecked immigration. All these things happened in Europe a decade ago, and I mean, in France, for example, we went to a Hezbollah rally that we heard was going on. They were protesting against Israel, as they always are, and I thought, let's go to this Hezbollah and Hamas rally that was going on there, and let's just do it undercover. And so it was right in front of the Louvre. They marched all the way from the Louvre to the Opera Square there, and they were burning Israeli flags. Then they started rioting. There was a McDonald's that we ate at, and they had destroyed the McDonald's about 15 minutes after we left. Just broke all the windows, and they started burning cars, and we got out of there. But it was probably about 30,000 people that were marching in the streets, chanting genocidal chants.
So, do,
against the Jews.
so when we're talking about borders and what happened in Europe, I actually had a friend of mine from church who visited Germany a few years ago, and when he came back, he said, "This is not the same place
Hmm.
like I remember or my parents remember." And there are multiple stories of local people, like families, they do not allow a young girl or a woman to walk down what used to be very safe streets because they would get either kidnapped or by the people, by
And
these
this is
foreigners
in
over
like
there.
Berlin.
Yes, yes.
I believe it. In fact, in France, out by the airport, there's these areas that they call them no-go zones, where if you're, for example, they don't want, it's very dangerous for non-Muslim ambulances to go in there. I've seen videos of them of people attacking ambulances with bricks. Excuse me, if they're
Wow.
not a Muslim owned ambulance company.
That's
That's the kind of stuff, because they don't want non-Muslims touching their wives or something like that. I mean, it's different things. There's extremists that are have taken it to such a level in the middle of Europe, where, for example, there were reports. I talked to somebody, one of the deputy mayors there of Neuilly, one of the suburbs of Paris, and he said that they have started enacting corporal punishment in some of these neighborhoods, where they won't take a supposed crime, an alleged crime, to the authorities. They'll say, no, let's take them to the imam and let's give them 10 lashings in the courtyard of the
wow.
projects. I mean, it's really gotten bad. And this was 2009. There was one of the police chiefs that I talked to that they said he went in and had, or I talked to one of the police members. They said their chief went in and said, "I'm not going to tolerate these no-go zones. We're going to go clean house." And they pulled up to one of these big, like 10, 15-story project buildings, and they went inside. And when they were inside, somebody pushed a refrigerator off the roof onto one of the squad cars. And I mean, that's the kind of stuff that they deal with.
Wow.
It's just, I mean, there was a number of stabbings that go on if somebody's wearing a yarmulke or something like that. I mean, it's gotten dangerous. I mean, you remember Charlie Hebdo, where they went in and killed the editors of the newspaper that published cartoons that they deemed to be offensive. And
So is this something that in Europe right now they are trying to address, fix? Is this just because of, hey, we're so nice, we need to welcome these refugees? Or is this, you think, maybe done in some ways intentionally?
it's a mix. There's certainly people that know the damage that they're doing and they want to cause chaos because they can't rebuild the nation, or the world rather, in their socialist utopia image if there's something in the way. And in our case, it's the Constitution that's in the way. In Europe, it's they're using. I mean, there's other governments there, so they can rebuild from the ashes, but that's the goal of some.
The goal.
But
Wow.
I think a lot of it is born in ignorance. I think it's naive people who do think the best, and they think that other people think like them. And I think that's one of the most dangerous concepts that somebody can have in their mind, is the concept of cultural relativism, the belief that all cultures are equal. Because the fact is that all cultures are not equal. There are some cultures that are just backwards and that have horrible backwards beliefs. And Western Judeo-Christian values are far superior to any other culture in the world today. And it's that's just how, I mean, you can look at how Afghanistan is versus here, and it's not to say that other cultures don't have plenty of good things about them, but there's you just look at how we live, how you can have 300 people sitting on an airplane from 300 different tribes sipping their ginger ale and not at each other's throat. That's just not possible without Judeo-Christian values, the values that everybody is created in the image of God, that I mean, it's just these barriers were broken down 2,000 years ago when that started, and yet it continues in places like Afghanistan, and that's the danger, is that people believe, there are people that believe, oh, well, they must think like us, they must be like us. But I mean, I'll give you some examples if you want to go into what I saw in Afghanistan. There's a tribe in the north called the Nuristani. These are it's a smaller tribe, but I was a city councilman in as you mentioned in one of the cities in Orange County. This is the prerequisite to becoming the equivalent of their city council, which is a tribal or one of the village elders, one of the village leaders. In America, we just run for election and we get elected. Well, in a Nuristani village, there are three things you have to do in order to be a tribal village leader. You have to be a good orator, so you have to speak well, and you have to host the entire village. I forgot if it's 3 times, but a number of times. Provide a good banquet and have it host the whole village, and you have to murder 5 rival tribe members.
You have to what?
You have to murder 5. See, you didn't. It's like, is that like did you? I really hear that correctly? You have to murder 5 rival tribe members. That's exactly it. That. It's so crazy that it's like that concept is just not in our belief. Like come again? I mean, yeah. But it's ridiculous. So think about it. And not only that, those rival tribes also believe in the blood vengeance, and so it just continues forever. And so that's one example, and that's something that's just ingrained in their tribal mindset there in that particular tribe. The Pashtuns in the south, they believe in there's a cultural tribal belief where when a woman is married at the wedding ceremony, they have to consummate the marriage. They go into a tent and they consummate the marriage. Well, if it's determined at the ceremony that the woman was not a virgin, then it is the obligation of the husband to murder the bride at the wedding. And then it gets worse than that. It's then the bride's family is obligated to put up another female relative, so a sister or a cousin, to replace her at the same wedding. And then they do this ceremony again and the same thing. And so
this is happening in our times.
This is in our times. And this is and I remember talking to a Pashtun guy that I worked with there, and I asked him, I thought, this is a guy, he's wearing a suit, albeit an 80s suit. They all look like they stepped out of the 80s. It's great. But he it seemed, I mean, I wouldn't say professional, but the least of the unprofessional Afghans that I worked with. And I asked him, because I'd been working with this guy for several months. I was like, hey, what do you think about this? Like you're a normal guy. Like, what do you think about these things? And he got all angry and was like, that's our culture. How dare you like question our culture? And it's like, okay, it was just really, it goes, there was another guy very similar. This was that's more on a tribal side of things, but on an Islamic side of things, there was somebody I met in Los Angeles, actually. It was a protest that we held at the King Fahd Mosque in Culver City. We actually had that mosque produced 2 of the 9/11 hijackers, and so we thought, you know what, let's go hold their feet to the fire, and let's condemn Bin Laden, and let's encourage them to issue a fatwa, an Islamic edict against Bin Laden. And so we went there. They said no, we don't need to do that, and so we thought, let's hold their feet to the fire. And so we held a public hanging of Bin Laden in effigy, and we invited them to join with us. And we were like, come and join with us. And we did it across the street. And so it was, and the shoes are the big insult in much of the Middle East. And so it was a hanging and shoeing. We were like, bring your shoes. And we were all over John and Ken on KFI radio, which is the big radio station there, and promoting it. We're like, bring your shoes, come to the hanging of Bin Laden. And we got, I don't know, there was probably 1,000 people there, but we actually had a number of Shia Muslims showed up because I mean, they don't get along too well with the Sunnis, and so it was a Sunni mosque. But they came with us, and a number of normal just guys who were born in a Muslim family or women that were they showed up. So we had Muslims on our side, and we're like, hey, join with us, and And that was one of our chants, actually. And so, but at that event, one of the guys, he's like foaming at the mouth, yelling like death, death to the infidel, just like a crazy jihadist. And I was like, I want to talk to that guy. So I went across the street and I was debating with him. And I asked him, I was like, look, you're an American. Like, do you actually believe that somebody who changes their religion in this country, that where we have free thought, should be killed? Because the Quran, actually it's the Hadith that says he who changes his religion, kill him. And it's like, and I'm talking to him like rationally. And I'm thinking this is a rational guy. And he just gets all angry, veins popping out. And he's like, those are God's laws that say we have to kill someone who changes their religion. It's man's law who says we don't. And it's, who are you to argue with God's law? So, I mean, that's the mindset that we're going up against. I mean, it's very
these people
different.
Come to a country like America, right? Like, what can you expect when you got, I mean, do you think there's a chance that some of these people are in our country right now?
Oh, I met one of them there at that event. I mean, it's like, yeah.
But I mean, like more right now, now that the border is wide
it was
open.
7-8 million that came through. So even if it's 1%, I mean, it's even if it's 10,000 people, even if it's 100, I mean, it was 19 people that carried out 9/11, and there's just so many opportunities for it. I think it's unfortunately only a matter of time.
Are you afraid something might happen soon?
Well, I'm not. I mean, I think the we just need to remain vigilant. That's the big thing, and people are waking up. I mean, thanks to a more connected society, which is really been put on overdrive. I think now that Twitter is X is a little bit more open than it was before. Everybody sees things in real time, and I think one of the things that saved us that you can look at what's happened in France, and I'm not just talking kinetic terrorist attacks. I'm talking, changing our culture. That's the real threat. Is the stealth jihad? Is you have people who come here, and if somebody, and a lot of these people from the Middle East, they've come from Islamic backgrounds that they just want to live their life like anyone else, and if they want to worship God however they want to worship, that's God bless them. I mean, that's their life, and that's what America should be all about. But when you come here with the idea that you should kill somebody if they change their religion, I mean, that's taking it another step further. And so there are people like that maybe are not actively engaged in terrorism, but they want to start to erode at our society and intimidate us from speaking out, that sort of thing. And it just takes more people standing up. And I think back to what I was saying about what separates us from Europe, that's really different is that we have the 14th Amendment, which I think has saved us. And I know a lot of people have thought, oh, birthright citizenship is not so great. What if, but in reality, and I used to think that too, that if somebody's here illegally, or if somebody is, I don't know, if they're isolated and they're born to illegal immigrants, that they shouldn't be citizens. That's what a lot of people think, and I used to think that. But the 14th Amendment, the way that it's currently interpreted, says that they're Americans if they're born on American soil. And now, after visiting Europe a number of times since then, I firmly believe that the way it should be is if someone's born here, they're an American, because that is the difference between here and the Netherlands or in France. Because if somebody is born from Moroccan parents in the Netherlands, they hold a Moroccan passport and they're looked at by the Dutch as a Moroccan. They're not looked at as a Dutch individual. Or same with in France, they're not looked at as French. They're looked at as Senegalese and so what it does is it creates this incredibly unhealthy balkanized state where you have these no-go zones where they all they just coalesce to each other and they're all hanging out and in America we don't have that. Nobody cares what ethnicity you are. Nobody cares what religion you are. Nobody pays any attention.
Well, they start caring just recently.
Oh yeah, because the left makes you want to care. I mean, they're like, yeah. That's the thing is there are sinister forces out there that want to highlight race. They want to highlight religion. They want to highlight gender, and that's the opposite direction that we need for unity. And here, we don't really see it stick. If two, let's say they're not just Muslims, but they're jihadists. Like there's two jihadists that come here and they have a kid, and the kid is born in America, and they're wearing a burqa, and they're because their parents are forcing them to, and they're going to school, and their friends are like, "You're not going to the mall dressed like that." Like that's kind of that's kind of because, and they're not going to want to. They're going to see what's out there and what the alternative is. They're going to want to be Americans, and after 2-3 generations, it disappears. They're just Americans, and it's like, and so. We don't really see that balkanization happening here as much as you do in other parts of the world, and I think the 14th Amendment is largely responsible for that.
Did you see recently? I think it was last year. There was an article written in the Wall Street Journal about. Actually, I have it right here. Basically, there was a study done on American values, and the article was America pulls back from values that once defined it. They did this poll, they compared to 1998 and 2003. So they were measuring patriotism, religion, having children, community involvement, and money. So from 1998 to 2023, patriotism went from 65 or almost 69% down to 30%. As of like, how much do you value that, right? Religion from close to 60 to 40. Having children, this one is crazy because it's a sharp decline from 60 to 25. Community involvement had a drastic drop, but the only value that actually went up is money.
Which shouldn't.
Yeah. So why do you think that is? Do you have an idea what's causing this kind of shift in our culture?
Yeah, there's a meme that explains it all. It's the hard times creates strong men create good times. Good times creates weak men create bad times. So, we're in the I mean, you see where we're at right now, and there's really no hardships out there that are not. I mean, granted, there's individual things that happen here and there to people on a one-on-one basis, but as society is concerned, there's really nothing you can't bounce back from. And the way that it's set up currently, you can walk outside and go get a job, start a company, go start over. I mean, there's our biggest holdups are usually self-inflicted, whether it's an addiction, whether it's holding on to something in the past that happened to us, mindset. Yeah. And so you have a lot of these kids that are growing up now, and I put kids all the way up to 30. And so, I mean, there's because the thing is, people don't grow up fast here anymore. They don't. You have people in their 20s that where 100 years ago they would have.
China.
Say again.
I think compare them to China.
Yeah, or anywhere else in the world for that matter, or just in Europe, or even just down in Mexico. It's like you got someone in their 25s, like they're in their mid 20s rather. They've got to be working, they've got to be thinking, they're raising a family. And here, I mean, usually people are pretty lost until they're about 30. There's no mandatory military service. There's no real wars going on. There's nothing that there's no economic depression. You can push a button. Even the poorest of the poor people living on welfare can push a button on their phone and get a pizza. And it's like, and that's something only a king could do 1,000 years ago. I mean, it's like, oh, give me a pizza. I mean, it's just not. And so you go work a minimum wage job and be fed and have a roof over your head. I mean, maybe not in some parts of America, but in most. I mean, it's really everything is out there. I mean, God gave us everything that we need, and this is the way that this government is structured enables that to actually be a reality. That we can go take what we want, build what we want, and nobody's going to take it from us. I mean, it's like, I mean, we complain about the taxes, which I want to keep the taxes low, but France is paying like 60%, whereas we're paying like in our 30s. And so I mean, you've got I mean, we're heading that way. I mean, when you have people saying, "Oh, we want give me more, give me more, give me more," and it's this gimme attitude that these younger generation
Feeling
have.
entitled.
Yeah, this entitlement,
Mhm.
exactly. They don't understand how good they've got it. Most have never set foot out of even California. I mean, they're the ones here. And if they have, they've never set foot out of America, and certainly not to go visit the slums of Mumbai or something like that and see how real poverty is. I mean, it's really there are so many countries like in North Korea, or you don't even have to go that far. You go to France or something where it's like you go where you try to start something and they just chip away at your ability
Oh
to
yeah,
succeed.
yeah.
It's just whether it's just paying absurd taxes, or in China, if you start to get any uh, measure of success, you're going to get a knock on the door from the CCP, and they're going to say, "Hey, congratulations on your success. We're now half owner." And so it's kind of, I mean, that's the
Yeah,
reality,
yeah.
and so we don't have any king that's taking it away from us that can just plunder. I mean, what we have, what we earn is ours, and so a lot of people don't realize that. So you have this entitled generation of weak individuals that didn't have to grow up in any amount of stress. I mean,
Mhm.
it's the stress that they feel is like, oh, I don't have enough followers on Instagram. Oh no, I can't believe Jamie defriended me. And like, I mean,
Did not like
these
my
are
post.
yeah, I mean, these are the types of things they're dealing with. Whereas, I mean, in the 1930s, they were standing in soup lines, and it's like you see people getting all bent out of shape over what pronoun that they're supposed to be called. Whereas, I mean, if there was actual real problems going on,
Mhm.
then I mean, you go up to somebody in the soup line in the 1930s and say, "Hey, what pronouns would you like me to call you?" I don't think you'd get far without a black eye. And so it's really that's what's caused it. That's where we're at. And I think the unfortunate reality is it's probably not going to change until there is some kind of economic hardship that
Something
hits us.
difficult that will
Yeah,
form.
and it's going to happen.
Yeah,
I mean, it's
it's a
cyclical,
cycle. Yeah, yeah,
and we've been on really a high wave since
yeah,
World War II. I
yeah.
mean, there was the recession, but even that was not anything compared to the Great Depression, and certainly not anything compared to some kind of to the Civil War or something like that. I mean, this is, and we're not immune. We're
Yeah,
definitely
yeah.
not immune.
You know, this podcast is, we try to talk about entrepreneurship on this podcast, and I'm really interested to hear, like, what was your thinking behind when you decided you're gonna start your own business? I mean, there's risk, there's fear of failure. Um, it's it's not easy. How did you come to, first of all, like, deciding that I'm going to do this? And how long did it take you until you knew that, hey, whatever I'm working on, I now see results? Because I know that results don't come right away. And right now, people have this thing where, like, instant gratification. You want to see results right away. You want things now. Somebody tries doing something, they don't succeed, they turn away from it, they try something else. Easy money, Bitcoin, let's invest. What's the latest stock? What's the latest thing to invest in to make money? How was it for you starting your business and going through that process of beginning just a thought of, I want to start a business, until you saw that, hey, I think I got something going here?
I think, I mean, it certainly, you ask anybody who's successful, the business that they're successful in is very unlikely to be the first business they ever did.
Mm-hmm.
They usually failed many times before I failed. I started a video game company that didn't do well. And I started I was always doing something, trying. I remember when I was in high school, I was one of the first nerdy kids that got a CD burner, and so there I was,
Oh.
and hopefully the piracy agency isn't watching, but this is like I don't know what the statute of limitations is, but in 1996, 97, I was making copies of people's music CDs and charging them $10. I was greedy. I mean, CDs are $20.
Oh, wow.
So, and so this is before I was a Christian, so I'm forgiven, right? So there I was, 14-year-old Jesse, making copies of CDs, and I would charge people. I think it was like $5 to duplicate one of their CDs to make them a copy, and then I'd get the copy of it, of course, and then $10 for. And I had a big list, and I'd go around school and I was selling CDs, and so that was my, I guess. Well, that wasn't even my first business. My first was I would pick up. I remember I was like 10 or 12, and I'd go down to the river and I'd pick up a bunch of like just cool rocks, and I set up a booth on the side of the road in front of my house that said rock sale.
Rock sale.
And I was selling rocks, and I remember it was the funniest thing because I'd put up signs around the neighborhood, rock sale with arrows, and people would be like, "What's a rock sale?" And they'd stop by and they see some cute kid, a 10-year-old sitting there behind the table, and I'd be like, "Oh, this is." And they'd be like, "How much do you want for this?" And I'd be like, "This is some quartz. This is nice. This is $5." And so I was selling rocks, and I mean, they're just rocks. They're not worth anything, and it was funny, but I realized that like it's all about sales. It's not about the product. And so once you learn how to do sales, you can sell anything. And it's really, and you can move, you could pivot, and the world works on people. And so sales are people. So that's it. Whether you're selling real estate, whether you're selling a widget, whether you're selling a service, it's all sales and it's all people. So you take people to lunch, you talk to them, you make them laugh, you chit chat, you get to be their friend, and then they buy from you. What do you know? And so it's really, I mean, I learned that pretty early on, but I didn't have any formal training in it. And so when I graduated from college, I got a dead end job in sales at a terrible company that with a terrible boss, and it was, and I hated it there. It was the pay was garbage, but I learned how to sell more, and I learned more. Say again?
You said a terrible boss.
Yeah, it was somebody that exactly somebody that was looking for get rich quick, the next scheme that they could do, and it was like, but they were burning bridges for me, and so it's like because I'm this guy selling the product, and they're doing switcheroos and unethical stuff, and I really saw that and was like, man, that's really not how to run a business, and so, but. Along the way, I was learning it was more. One thing I will give them credit for is they gave me a book. They gave all their sales people a book. It was the Little Red Book of Selling by Jeffrey Gitomer. And so, if you haven't read that, I highly recommend it. It's a little book, a little red book, and it's not very long. I think it's like 70 pages or something.
It's called The Art of Selling.
The Little Red Book of Selling. And I remember I read that over and over and over again, and it was just it was like gold because it's stuff that I already knew some of, but then it just like shaped it all together. I mean, it had so many lessons in there, and I started learning that. Then I realized, you know what, I gotta get more training for this if I want to be more successful in sales, and so I also bought a book, another very popular, famous book, How to Win Friends and Influence People.
Dale Carnegie?
Yes, Carnegie, who actually changed his name, the spelling, to match the famous Carnegie from Carnegie Steel.
Oh,
that's it wasn't even spelled correctly, or spelled the same, I should say. And so he did that just for marketing. And so, but that's another great book. I started learning all these because the doctrinal how to sell. There are lessons out there. You don't have to start from scratch. And so once I learned that, I mean, I already knew I wanted to do something, and it didn't matter what. I just wanted a business that was successful. And so I ended up, I was selling cables for the cell towers, and I thought, okay, I saw the need for cable management for the towers. And so now that's my business, is I make the little clips that clip the cables to cell towers. Like, it's such a weird thing, but and I never thought like, oh, what do you want to do when you grow up? And firefighter, policeman. I want to sell the cable hangers that clip the cables to cell towers. Like, it's just not something that's on the radar. But that's the way that I got into that was when I got fired from that job. I went to go visit somebody in the industry, and the next day, and I went to their warehouse, and I said, can we walk around the warehouse? And I want to see what you need. I don't have anything to sell. I want to see, well, what do you need? And so they walked me around and they said, you know what we really need is we got these cables and we don't have, these are new cables. We don't have any way to hang them. We're using zip ties. And I'm like, okay, there it is. So there's my business. And that was
So
it.
you invented
And well,
the
it was, they already had some things. It was just modifying it to fit that cable. And so
wow.
it was like, because the cables are always changing, the technology is
Mhm.
changing, fiber optics we're getting new, so it was a smaller hanger, and I mean, there's little things like that it's like, okay, you never sell a product, you say, okay, what do you need? I
You
mean,
solve
that's
a problem.
it's all
That's
about, yeah.
mhm.
You don't come up with a solution looking for a problem. That's the biggest mistake that people make
Mhm.
in starting a business. You got to go find the problem, even if it's something that's not sexy. Like, I mean, cable hangers. Like, who cares? Like, it's not something that I'm gonna be putting on my gravestone. Like, this guy made the best cable hangers. Like, it's just, but who cares? It pays the bills, and it's fun, and that was my first product with our business. And it's branched into all sorts of things since then
Mhm.
related to the industry. In fact, if you go to the Giants Stadium, you'll be talking on every call, every tweet where the San Francisco Giants play is going over our equipment there now. So it's like that's the
Oh,
kind of
wow.
stuff that we're branching into is more high end equipment in the industry. So who knows? I mean, all industries, all businesses, it's like a river. You're just looking for the next thing
Mhm.
of where things are going, and you're not the one that's really driving it. The industry
The
is. I mean,
industry
there's
is,
some
yeah.
people that are, but like Steve Jobs
Elon
or
Musk.
Elon Musk or folks like that, but you're not going to be one of those, and don't try. Like, that's the
He's
biggest thing.
crazy. I mean, I'm
It's
reading
like, what
his book, Elon Musk's book.
these people are amazing. I mean,
The
they don't sleep. They don't. These are brilliant people, and
I
most
mean,
of
he's
us are not that
sacrificing.
brilliant. And so the fact is that, but plenty of us are super smart and able to figure out and see, okay, well, what scraps did they leave behind? And so it's like,
Or
and
ideas.
yeah, because I'll
Because
tell you, the
they
cable
recycle
hanger
ideas.
was something that the guy that I met with, there's an $8 billion market evaluated at the time competitor of ours. Their valuation was 8 billion at the time, 10 years ago, who made the similar item in that of that,
Mhm.
and they actually sent. They were talking to their sales rep and was like, "We need this size of cable hanger." And they told them to go pound sand. They said it's just not worth it enough. A few $1 million is just not worth it for us. And
Ah.
so they wouldn't do it. And I was like, I'll take it. So it's like, and then we ended up capturing such a huge chunk of the market share
Oh, wow.
for those that virtually every AT&T tower on the West Coast has our hangers on it now, 10 years later. And so, what's funny is about 5 years later, that company came out with, it was exactly the same as our hanger. They took the mold, only it says Petrilla on the side. Where ours says Petrilla, they have a little black box, like it's been erased from the mold. And so and that's the $8 billion competitor. It took them about 5 years to knock us off, and it
Wow.
was like, and I was laughing my butt off when I saw that on the table at a trade show of those folks. I was like, this is ours. This is the one you turned down. And what do you know? We already have such a chunk of the market share of that we're still selling them, and it's like. Because it's taken 10 years of relationships that we've built up, of lunches and handshakes and
Mhm.
those things that people are like, okay, why am I going to switch to these other guys now that it's like I've already been buying it from you?
Yeah.
And so, because that's the thing, is people don't want to deal with an $8 billion monster. They want to deal with the mom
Yeah.
and pop shop where they can see that it's like, okay, I place an order with you. I've met your kids. I see that the kids are like, they come into the office, and when somebody stops by for a will call, like they'll see the kids running around sometimes, and it's like, wow, like, okay, my dollars are going to help like that kid's college, and it's not going to satisfy some shareholders. And
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
that company, by the way, the $8 billion company, the last I saw the market cap, it was like 800 million. So
Oh,
it's gone
wow.
down quite a bit.
Well,
Like
like
10 to 1.
that's something about the what happens with these big companies. Look at like Blockbuster, Kmart, right? When they get so big,
Mhm.
they get complacent. It's like Goliath and David's story, right? Like, um, hey, nothing can touch us. We're so big. We got so much of the market share. And then there's somebody who's willing to work harder and outwork, outmaneuver, and then time goes by, and then they end up losing the market share because at the one point they were, you know, they didn't really care.
Right.
So
yeah, now they care. I mean, they care enough to knock off my little part.
so you guys sell like in California, or
It's worldwide.
it's
I mean, yeah.
worldwide? Oh
So we
wow.
sell most of it's West Coast, but we've got a big distributor in the Midwest. But I did some work down in Chile in South America. We're doing some cool stuff down there.
Awesome.
I've tried Europe, but they're too cheap. They just everybody is buying from China direct there for the most part, and it's really difficult to get in there. It's also very incestuous. There's not a lot of I found in so many countries. There's bribery. There's people appointing their cousins to different positions for in the industry. I mean, it's we don't see that as much in America. I mean, it certainly exists, but it's nothing to the level that you see in other countries where they're going to be buying from their uncle or whatever. I mean, so the market is here. I don't need to turn this into a $1 billion company. I mean, I'm very happy being a mom and pop shop. I had some great advice. I hired a consultant that I learned a lot from for about 5 years. He was just before retirement. He said, I'll give you 5 years. And he used to run a company that was very similar in the same industry, pretty much the same business plan, only much, much bigger. They had about 6,000 employees at their peak and just shy of $1 billion a year in revenue, something like $957 million a year. But they went out of business in 2013, the same year that I started my company. And that's another kind of like divine story that's just so weird. I mean, people say it's weird, but I think things happen for a reason. I was picking up some patio furniture of all things, and I missed my street. This is down in Santa Ana in Orange County, and I'm like, okay, I'll cut through through this vacant parking lot. And I'm going through, and it's obviously there's like weeds growing up through the cracks, and I'm looking, and it's just some beautiful corporate office building. And I'm just dreaming. This is still early on in my career before I realized it's really not that important. But I was dreaming like someday I'm gonna have a corporate like headquarters like this, and it's like I wonder what this used to be. Like this must have been some kind of amazing company. And I Googled it, and I couldn't believe it. It was the most famous company in our industry, in our small industry, that I didn't even know had been based in California, because I was already in the industry for a couple of years prior to starting my own company, and I knew they went out of business. I remember it was a big deal, and I was like, that's crazy. Like, out of all the places in the whole world that I actually turn into the old headquarters of this company. And I was like, I'll bet they lost a lot of talent a couple years ago when this company went out. I wonder what their executives are doing. So I put it in park. I'm still there in the parking lot. And I go on LinkedIn, and I find their CEO, and I send him a message there while I'm in the parking lot. He responds instantly and says, hey, I'm actually going to be in your area tomorrow afternoon, and I can stop by your office. I'm doing consulting now. And I'm like, hey.
Wow.
So he was in my office the next day. I retained him. He was my consultant. He said, I'll give you 5 years, and I'll help you build the company. And it was like, gave me a great rate, came in a couple days a week. That's it. I mean, I could only afford 2 days a week for him. And but he brought so much. And the biggest thing that he brought, I think, was stopping me from growing it as big as I wanted to. He said, you don't want to do that. You want to carve out your niche. You want to keep it small. Because I'll tell you, when I was running the company with 6,000 people, I never slept. I never saw my family. I was on a plane every day dealing with the most crazy stresses. He had factories all throughout Asia and other parts of the world. He said that he would fly to these countries in the middle of nowhere, some factory in some rural area, and have to quell riots of workers and just different things that would just it created such a level of stress that probably took 10 years off his life. And
how old was he when you talked to him?
He was pretty young. He's mid-50s probably. So yeah, he would have been in his 40s when he's doing this, and so he, from spending those 4 or 5 years just chatting with him and learning from him, I really realized the importance of taking it just to that level to where it's successful, but you're not so stressed, and that it's because what's the point? I mean, we can't take it with us, and the only point of being past that threshold of being wealthy enough to not have to worry about your kid's college, not have to worry about food, not have to worry if something happens tomorrow that you won't have enough in the bank. Like beyond that threshold, happiness really goes down. There's actually been studies that have happened. I'm sure it's been updated with the amounts, but I remember when I read it about 10 years ago, it showed they did surveys of happiness, and it showed from zero, like unhappy. Money increased happiness up to about 50 grand at the time, which is probably double now.
Mm-hmm.
But it increased. It was about 50 grand. It went way up, and then after that, it kind of plateaued a little bit, and then it went way down. And people that were making 200, 300, 400 or even more were incredibly unhappy. Depression was through the roof. It was just like because those jobs create so much stress to have that, and not just that. You start to lose sight of things. People are I mean, out to get you. The more money you have, the more attention you have, and it's just like people start getting jealous. I mean, it's just really there's no point. And so I think the only point that would have to be like a multi-millionaire or a billionaire would be to do philanthropy. I think that's the only thing
Mm-hmm.
that would be beneficial of that. Because we can't. I mean, I don't know if you've seen or heard the saying that I once met somebody who was so poor that all they had was money.
Well, like I said, I'm reading this book right now by Elon Musk. Well, it's about him by Chris Isaacson. He wrote a lot of books about Benjamin Franklin. I think he wrote one about Steve Jobs. And, you know, I'm beginning to kind of understand that somebody like Elon Musk, his mind is always going. He could never really keep a relationship with a woman for a long time. He is so committed to whatever he is doing, whatever he's building, that I just honestly, like, I don't really think that he's a very happy man. And I think that maybe one of the reasons why he decided to buy Twitter and be like the promoter or whatever else word that you can put in for like free speech was because he's searching to do something for a bigger cause than just like everything that he's doing, like even like the rockets, everything. It's more than average person is thinking about doing in their life, right? For him, SpaceX is, hey, we're gonna create a civilization on Mars. Who thinks like that? Oh, by the way, did you hear that? I think just a few weeks ago, I heard the story that the first person already got the the chip
the
in the
implant.
brain. Yeah. And they're with thinking they were able to move the mouse, the cursor, the mouse, like just with thinking.
Creepy.
It's yeah.
Well, don't count on me signing up for that.
Hey, it's very similar to like the thing where when internet came out, or like what you said earlier about the credit cards, when people were hesitating
Right.
paying with credit cards, right? It's like, oh no, not me. And then you look a decade later,
Yeah,
2
everybody's
decades later,
storing it everywhere. It's like they just tap
yeah.
things. It's all stored. Everything is, yeah.
I mean, well, I've heard today on a podcast, on PBD podcast, Tom Ellsworth, he was talking about how he saw some guy who wasn't able to move his hand, or he said after doing something like that, he was able to eat because of that, some kind of signal in the brain. Because I guess they can go and zoom in on the area of the brain that is not firing. I mean, I don't know how it works. I wouldn't even know the right terms. But if someone, let's say, has some kind of a disability, maybe they were in the military, they got injured, right? And it's helping them, regain some kind of function. I mean, maybe they have a different perspective on that. Us healthy people saying, yeah, we don't want anything like that. But who knows where it's gonna lead? And if someone has or takes control of this kind of technology, what's the result? Where is this gonna go? Right?
No,
It's kind of
that's
crazy.
the type of entrepreneurship though that can be that can take a course that's very good for humanity. Like you said, if you're trying to make somebody walk again, they can't walk
Mm-hmm.
or see. I mean, I've heard about implants that have fixed
Maybe.
people's
Yeah.
sight. I
Yeah.
mean, there's stuff the technology that they're working on that, and if somebody does invent the cure for cancer, for example, like then they should be rewarded. I mean, that's rewarded financially. I mean, that's it's so cool when you can find something that is productive, that's not detrimental to society. Like, I mean, you could go and start a cigarette company, or you could go and start I don't know, something that like we discussed. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
there's entrepreneurship that's for good, and I think what Elon Musk is doing, you said it before, that he's focused at the time was two things. He wanted to focus on energy independence
Mm-hmm.
and on creating like the cars on Tesla, and on making us a multi-planetary species. So because that's the thing, is this there's Earth killer asteroids, there's pandemics, there's all kinds of stuff that can happen that have wiped out huge chunks of the Earth in the past, and we know it's finite and it's an infinite galaxy out there.
Mm-hmm.
So that's it's like we shouldn't be investing and investigating the possibility of getting off this planet when the Earth killer is like a few days away. It's like we don't always see these things coming. So I think it's great what he's doing, and I think the third part of it that he's kind of been forced into is connecting the world. That's
Mm.
the element that I've been steered in toward within telecommunications. Is
Mm-hmm.
I thought, this is something, because I had always known that I want to start a business, and I've always been searching for purpose, as everybody else is. And another great book, the third one that I'll mention, is The Purpose Driven Life
Yes.
by Rick Warren.
Rick Warren.
We
Yeah.
actually went to Saddleback Church for about 5 years,
Oh, wow.
and so lived right across the street from it, and yeah, I mean, it was really the impact that book has had on the world is just tremendous. So because everyone's looking for purpose, and
Yes.
it's it really talks, for those who haven't read it, about finding your purpose in God, that God has given us all unique talents and abilities and our place in the world, no matter what it is. Some people are great artists, so they should go pursue a career in art. Some people are great at math, so they should go go work for NASA or something. I mean, there's so many people, whatever they're good at is what they should do. And so it's about finding what you get. And when you're good at something, and if you love doing it and you enjoy it, and you're going to flourish
Mm-hmm.
in that environment. But if you're doing the wrong thing, I mean, I'll give my uncle as an example. He was a lawyer. My grandfather was a lawyer. When he came to America, he went to law school. He was like, I'm going to be a lawyer. And then he was very aggressive to his kids and was like, you will be a lawyer. And so he never wanted to be a lawyer. He wanted to be a music composer. And he
Mm.
was more of an artsy guy. Guy had a heart attack in his 30s, and I mean, and he passed away several years ago, pretty young. I mean, I think it was early 70s, but it was like, but still, it's like this guy had Hodgkin's along the way. He had all kinds of just health problems his whole
Mm-hmm.
life, and I don't think any of that would have happened if he was pursuing the career that he was supposed to, that was using his God given talents. But he
Mm.
was an unhappy lawyer, very depressed his whole
Wow.
life,
Wow.
and it killed him. And so I think that happens every day. People are in the wrong job. They're not fulfilling their purpose. And so if they are, they're going to know it, and it's going to show. I mean, they're going to be happy.
How
And
does someone start or figures out what their purpose is or find that purpose?
well, there's 40 chapters in The Purpose Driven Life that explain, but I'll tell you
Mm.
the impact that book has had too. I was amazed. I didn't realize just to the level until I visited Rwanda a couple years ago, and I was absolutely impressed with. I mean, you go to visit churches there, and they've got purpose driven whatever all around, and they're just all,
Mm.
I actually met with some of their government leaders, and it was amazing. I met with the minister of telecommunications there, and she loves Rick Warren. She's good friends with him. He's come there numerous times, and I'm just like, Like, seriously, like our church, like what's going on? I knew he's famous, obviously, but it was just really the impact that this guy has had and this book has had. Because what happened was President Kagame in Rwanda came in just after the genocide there, and so you had two warring factions that just came out of a brutal civil war where the Hutus were doing the genocide against the Tutsis.
Mm-hmm.
And so now you have a Tutsi, a guy from a Tutsi background that's in charge, and he read The Purpose-Driven Life, and he thought, this is it. Like, we're all children of God, and so he used that as the template, and he had Pastor Rick come over to help come up with a reconciliation plan, and he essentially based it off the book between the two,
Mm-hmm.
and it's really incredible to see the impact that has, and just I mean, I was in one church and I asked him too. I said, you've got a few hundred congregants here. Do you have members that took part in this genocide, that facilitated it? Because he said we're all Rwandans in this church, and he said yes, they do. That he has people that he knows hacked up people and like they took part in this.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, what do you do? Like, you had his own family was many of them were killed in this. And he said, I hugged them. I welcomed them with open arms and hug them because we can't let it continue. And it's like, wow, I don't know if I could do
amazing.
that. Yeah, it's really
Yeah.
But yeah, that book had just such an impact on that country, and I know that President Kagame keeps. He makes the foundation God.
Well, speaking of books,
Mhm.
Tell us a little bit about the book that.
So I just signed a contract with Bombardier Books, and excuse me.
You signed a contract with who again?
So I just signed a contract with Bombardier Books. They've got a number of pretty good authors in there.
Mm-hmm.
Jerome Corsi, Robert Spencer. They've got is it Dan Bongino is another one?
Yeah.
That they've signed with. So it's a book about the jihadist threat and what we can do about it. So it's the mindset of the jihadists. So I talk about the name of the book is If It Takes 1,000 Years, and it's not out yet. You can't buy pre-sales, but you can go to ifittakes1000years.com and enter your email address, and so you'll get alerted as soon as it's available. But those words were told to me by a Taliban commander when I was in Afghanistan. My job was to facilitate the interrogations of the Taliban. It's funny, it didn't start out that way. When I took the tour, I raised my hand to go to Afghanistan, and here I had just come off of a decade of fighting against the jihadists at the grassroots level, and they said, how would you like to be the personal representative to the Taliban detainees? And I'm like, what are you talking about, personal representative? That was the actual title that I had on my orders. It said personal representative. Yeah, your job is going to be to make sure that they're not being tortured, make sure that you're going to make sure their needs are being taken care of. It even got down to the point where there's like arrows in their cell, and you need to make sure like that's facing Mecca, and that they have it was like out of all the people. Wow. And they said, what you're going to do? I didn't have to do any of that. It was like but that's the stuff because somebody had already done it all before I got there. But they said your job is your main job is going to be to represent them in the trials. So you're going to be like their defense attorney. And I'm like, what are you talking about? I'm a combat arms tanker. Like, you're going to make me the defense attorney? And who's the prosecution? And they were like, those are the JAG attorneys. And I'm like, wow. So I go there. Out of all the people in the world, they chose me. It was so funny because every single hearing, they call them the detainee review boards, the DRBs, they would say, does the personal representative have anything to add in the detainee's defense? And I'd always stand up and say, I have nothing to add. And then I'd sit down. So they got the wrong person, but it was awesome. I had an all access badge to the detention facility in Parwan. It was virtually unrestricted. Like, I mean, I could talk to the detainees any time I wanted. I had all the access to them. And then that only lasted about a month. And then my boss walks over and is like, okay, how do you want to go to the other side? How would you like that? And I'm like, okay, sure. And so they made me on the prosecution side. They made me the liaison officer to the Afghan prosecutors. So it was their equivalent of the KGB, the agency that I was liaisoning to, and so it was called the NDS. They, but yeah, one of the guys was actually a former KGB agent. It was really cool talking to the old guys because they all like a lot of them were from the previous Russian government. They lived in Russia during the Taliban times, and then they came back. But it was really fascinating because my job from that point on, for about 4 of the 6 months that I was there, was to facilitate the interrogations of the Taliban and Al Qaeda and other detainees, Haqqani, that were there. And so every day I was meeting with them, I was talking with them, I was drinking tea with them, I was their friend, and it was like. And so it's not like the movies we're pouring water on them. And no, it was like you're drinking tea and you're, tell me about your family and that kind of stuff. So I got to know these Taliban commanders. And I was talking to one of them and he said, yeah, you've got me in a cage. My war is over. I'm not fighting you anymore. But my children are out there and they will fight you. And their grandchildren, if they don't win, they will fight you. And their children will fight you. If it takes 1,000 years, we will defeat you.
Wow.
And so those words stuck with me.
He said you, he meant the West?
You, the West, yes.
Wow.
And so if it takes 1,000 years is the name of the book. And it's really, I've got a couple chapters about Afghanistan there. We've got chapters about my times in the Balkans and in Egypt. Just different, just what I've learned from all these fact-finding missions. Yeah, it's really.
I'm looking forward to.
You've read one of the chapters.
I did.
What were your thoughts?
I found it fascinating. I don't know, like, how did you learn to write like that, or you had some help?
I just tell the story.
Read a lot of,
it's people like first-person stuff.
Yeah.
It's like just they like personal experiences. I mean, it's really there's no substitute for a first-hand account.
In our podcast, it's called the Greatest Story Podcast, and my thinking behind it was, in life, sometimes we can be one story away from changing our trajectory, whether in a positive or a negative way. And earlier, you shared a story about the Bible and the bookmark. Is that a story that had one like the biggest impact in your life, or maybe there's something else that?
Yeah, I mean that's the start. I mean, up to that point I was lost. I mean, I really didn't know that there was a plan for me. I was just kind of shooting at the hip like everyone else is, and so at that age, and not really knowing what there was out there. I mean, I think that's. I grew up in a broken home, as all too many kids are this day and age, and I think that's the real epidemic in this country is fatherless homes.
Yes.
And when I realized that I have a Father in heaven who loves me and has planned for me, I mean that changed everything. And I think when you're working for an audience of one, which is God, it changes your perspective on the world completely, and you're no longer trying to satisfy everyone else and be a people pleaser. And so that's definitely, that story is the biggest. Now, that story only happened a couple years ago, so if you had asked me before that, I don't know what story I would say. But it probably, I think, that's it. I mean, just.
Thank you very much for sharing. How can people find you?
If it takes 1,000years.com. Go check it out. Easy. Put your email in if you want to check out the book. It hopefully later this year. It's in editorial right now, and hopefully they don't change too much on it. I don't think they will, but we'll see.
Jesse, thank you very much.
Thank you.
It's an honor. Appreciate it.